Good evening, everyone. Oh, you look great. You all look fantastic. The first thing I'm going to ask is that you join me in silencing these little devils. And make sure you do it properly. I've been caught up once or twice thinking that I'd done so, and then finding out that, in fact, it had not worked. So, yeah, now that our phones are silenced, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to, which is it now, Joe? Is it 7? 6? I'm getting ahead of myself. To the 6th Quinlan Family Lecture on Poetry, which is a very special night on our calendar of events at Glucksman Ireland House. It's special for a number of reasons. So the first is because when Joe Quinlan came to myself and to Joe Lee to want to do something at Glucksman Ireland House and to support the programming that we do here, he made it very clear that he wanted to do something in poetry. And that rhymed with our feelings about how Glucksman Ireland House has been a shelter and a home for poets from Ireland and from America since it was founded almost 25 years ago. We're coming up on our 25th anniversary year. And it's quite an astonishing list of poets who have been here and who have read here before. So it's also a special night because the Quinlan Family Lecture in Poetry marks a very important collaboration with our dear friends at the Irish Arts Centre. The Irish Arts Centre is the premier home for Irish drama, music, and artistic productions of a very wide variety of kinds here in New York City. And this collaboration marks, I think, a very good vision for actually linking up the kinds of academic programming that we do here with the public programming of the Irish Arts Centre. And so we're delighted that we've been able to collaborate with Rachel Gilkey, who's here with us tonight, and with the wonderful Aidan Connolly and Pauline Turley as well. And we also wish the Irish Arts Centre every success as they break ground on their new facility in the spring. It's also, the Quinlan Family Lecture marks the beginning of the Irish Arts Centre Poetry Festival, which runs through this weekend at the Irish Arts Centre and brings a range of Irish and American poets together to read and discuss, to read their own poetry, but also to read their own favorite poems. So I believe Friday night is sold out, which is wonderful. It's terrific that this poetry festival continues to be successful. It was curated for many years by Belinda McKeown and Angus Woods, and is now being brilliantly shaped and shepherded by Nick Laird, who's here with us tonight, and I'll introduce in a moment. So I encourage you to attend the events here this weekend. I'm sorry, at the Irish Arts Centre this weekend. Another reason why this is a very important evening for us is because of the collaboration that the Quinlan Family Lecture has established with the Seamus Heaney Centre for Poetry at Queens University Belfast, and particularly with the Seamus Heaney Prize winner, whom we welcome here tonight. Joe Quinlan's vision of doing something specific at Ireland House that connected with the north of Ireland, with institutions in the north of Ireland that the Quinlan family has supported, including the Lyric Theatre, but also the Seamus Heaney Centre. We were extraordinarily blessed that Seamus Heaney gave his strong support to the idea of linking the Quinlan Family Lecture with the Seamus Heaney Prize, and with the idea that through Joe and Mary Lou's generosity, the prize itself was actually secured and established for the first years of its funding. So the collaboration with Queens University Belfast is deeply important to us and to the sense of how we imagine the relationship between New York City and Belfast to be grounded in arts and in collaborative endeavors. And in that regard, I want to say a special word of thanks to Lorraine Turner at the Northern Ireland Bureau and the British Council for supporting tonight's event and for contributing to the reception, and for also helping to do the kinds of things that the Quinlan Lecture is seeking to do. A last, but by no means least, special reason for welcoming you tonight and for reflecting for a moment about this occasion is because this is a family night. This is a night where we recognize the generosity of Joe and Mary Lou, but we also welcome their extended family through the witness that Joe and Mary Lou have brought to their father Tom, but also to the welcome that the house has been able to have every year to the extended Quinlan family, which has now got 4 generations here in the room. Here all to honor Tom Quinlan. It's a night where Glucksman Ireland House feels like a home, and that's very important to us. It's important to us in the kinds of ways that we inhabit the space in our teaching endeavors and in our teaching commitments, but also in moments where the public comes in and actually feels the community actually that Glucksman Ireland House has been lucky to establish. Here to introduce Tom Quinlan and to say a word about the family is grandson number 3, Brian Newshell, who is the father of the 3 beautiful little great-grandchildren. No, sorry. Okay.
He is 3, but not here.
Okay, he has 3, but he's not here. But anyway, I'm happy to introduce Brian Newshell.
And for the record, yes, I do have three kids. They are quite cute, just don't happen to be here, and they send their love. So thank you for that. You're dead on with that statement. Can I have your attention, please? Okay, so I knew I'd at least get one laugh, so thank you for my father for laughing at me. But one of my favorite quotes from Tom Quinlan, the man that can command a room, no matter whether it's a schoolhouse in Philadelphia or the back parlor after Thanksgiving. So when Joe asked me to introduce Tom Quinlan on behalf of 4 generations, as you said, I was quite honored. I thought of a million things I could say, but let me just say first, Tom, my grandfather, you are loved. This is a room full of people that are here, thankful that your love of us, your love of poetry is what brought us here together. So multiple years, thank you for those who have been here over the years for this event.
You're welcome.
All right, see? He's a man of humility, yet knows how to be assertive and share his message when need be. So, like I said, it's my honor. He's my grandfather. His love of poetry is infectious. If you grew up in this family and didn't love poetry, you'd lie, because that's what you had to say, and then you'd develop it over the years as you heard a small note written down or heard a poem read by Tom at Thanksgiving. So it's just sort of inside of us. Tom's always been both a student and a teacher. He's always had this balance that's been a challenge for me, an encouragement, I'll say it that way, for me in my life. So the things that he knows and has, he shares with others. And then he's also always looking to learn from others, and that's, in the classroom, years in the classroom, it's been there, but it never stopped in or out of the walls. So to me, that's always been an encouragement and just an honor to sort of stand here for a minute today. So I know for myself, every time I see him, I'm thinking for myself, what book am I reading? Because I'm always worried about that question. What book are you reading, and what's your favorite, poem or favorite book these days? And so we've learned, yeah, see. So he's a man of great honor and great love, of great study. But those that know him know he's just so humble, quick with a self-deprecating joke, which I love. And it's just an honor to introduce him to you all tonight. So Tom, I'll help you come up here.
Put it over here.
How's that? He gets the microphone wherever he wants.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, I thought it was the light. Good evening. Welcome. Before I start, I want to find out if you can hear me when I'm not on the mic. Okay? So I'll say a few words. Right? And not the front people. You don't count. The people in the back, I'm going to ask you, if you can hear me, raise your hand. I didn't start the poem yet. Keep your hands down. Okay, just a few words. And if I can, I'll try it without the microphone. anything that comes to my head. How about, oh, the outlook wasn't brilliant for the Mudville Nine that day. Score stood 4-2. 1 inning more to play.
Okay.
How many people in the back could hear that? One? Oh, you can hear it? Okay.
Watch out for the mic, watch out for the cord.
Now let's try it with the mic.
We're down there just watching.
Oh,
We like you here.
here?
Don't we love him here?
Is this better here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Today we honored a couple of men, Seamus Heaney, and we welcome and honor Adam Crothers. One man, a lifetime of success and joy with language, and a young man coming into the world. We're delighted and we salute you and we wish you well. Let's have applause for this young man. All right, I'm going to read a poem by Seamus Heaney. As you know, if Seamus were here, he could read it himself, but he is not here, although he is with us. It's very difficult on the part of an audience to listen to some strange man read a poem if you don't have the poem in front of you. So your job is bigger than mine. I got the words in front of me, and I'll read them. I hope you can follow it closely. It's a beloved poem by Seamus Heaney, one of his most famous, called Blackberry Picking. Blackberry Picking was written by a young man in his 20s, and it's a memory poem. It's a memory poem, and he thinks back when he was a young boy, when something really got him excited. He's a farm boy, so his excitement and joy came from the farm. He dreamed about growing blackberries, wild blackberries. And you and I have had our dreams too. Things that we remember that happened, and things that didn't happen. As life goes on, these memories fade, but they don't fade for him. Blackberry Picking is a memory poem by a great poet who talks about the gathering of berries in a little farm in Northern Ireland. Here we go. Late autumn, given the heavy rain and sun for a full week, blackberries would ripen. At first, just one glossy purple clop, among others red and green, hard as a knot. You ate that first one, and its flesh was sweet like thick wine. Summer's blood was in it, leaving stains upon the tongue and a lust for picking. Then red ones inked up. And that hunger sent us out with milk cans and pet tins and jam pots, where briars scratched, wet grass bleached our boots. Round hayfields, cornfields, potato drills. We trekked and picked until the cans were full. until the tinkling bottom had been covered with green mountain on top. Big dark blobs burned like a plate of ice. And our hands were peppered with thorn pricks. And our palms sticky as all bluebirds. We hoarded the fresh berries in the barn. And when the bath was filled, we found a fur, a rat gray fungus glitting on our catch. The juice was stinking. Once off the bush, the fruit fermented. The sweet flesh would turn sour. I felt like crying. It wasn't fair. And all the lovely handfuls stink of rot. Each year I hope that they keep. I knew they wouldn't. The end.
Well done, Tom. The teacher's voice is unmistakable. The teacher's voice can be heard. It's a great pleasure for me to just say a very brief word of introduction for the curator of the Irish Arts Centre Poetry Festival, Nick Laird. Nick is now a colleague who teaches the creative writing program here at NYU. The author of now 3 novels and 3 collections of poetry, To a Fault, On Purpose, and Go Giants. Nick's won a raft of prizes. They're very impressive. The Betty Trask Prize, the Rooney Prize, the Joffrey Faber Memorial Prize, the Somerset Maugham Prize, as well as the Guggenheim from last year. And I think perhaps the Guggenheim helped Nick finish. I remember seeing him in the lobby just after he had sent off the manuscript for this, his most recent novel, Modern Gods by Nick Laird. I can't recommend it warmly enough. It's incredibly punchy and wickedly funny and sharply observed, and Nick has graced us with wonderful introductions to the poets that we've welcomed here to Glucksman Ireland House before. So please join me in welcoming Nick Laird to welcome Adam Crothers.
Hi. Delighted to be here and see you all again this year. So, this is a terrific book. I've done my homework. I'm going to read it out now for you. So, Several Deer is the name of the book. It's a vigorous debut full of wit and sonic pleasure. Adam Crothers has a terrific ear for the resonant idiom and takes delight in wrong-footing the inattentive reader. His work demands to be reread. The book opens, "How can you call me a misogynist? My mother was a woman hater, and I must at all costs rebel. When in a Roman I do as girls do, something about coming out of my shell. Something about crying for joy at last, some hustle." One notes the tonal shifts, the full outrage, the line break falling so the sense is reversed on us. My mother was a woman hater, and I must at all costs rebel. The sexual braggadocio, the inner shyness, the unabashed sentiment and release, and the last ironic twist of admission that the sexual union is also a conquest, a trick, another hustle. He goes a long distance in a short what's the word? He travels very far in a short distance, that's the way of putting it. So, like all first books, Several Day delights in repurposing its influences. There are some pathfinders here from Ireland and Britain. You can see Paul Muldoon in Crothers' relational rhymes. Cumbria and Sombrero is a memorable one. And in a poem like Kid, Crothers nods to the same end sounds Simon Armitage uses in his poem of the same name. But the main thrust of Crothers' influences is from this side of the Atlantic. Particularly we find Michael Robbins, the contemporary American poet who himself sprang from Berryman and Seidel, who are touchstones here. Like Robbins, Crothers is an inveterate magpie, feathering his nest with lines from country music or metal or blues or pop music. And like Robbins, Crothers mixes high and low culture, having Carly Simon or Bruce Springsteen dance with Thomas Wyatt and Shakespeare. But although Crothers is a poet of rhetorical dazzle, of playful earnestness, of deadly jokes, and Several Day is replete with tricks and rage, it is also a quieter and softer book than that might suggest. Crothers is acquainted with the sober realities, with the cold places. He is a fine poet of the grave. Neil, one of his poems, begins with more of the pose of the enfant terrible, defacing the old guard of poetry. It starts, "The chapel pukes its shadow on the courtyard. The shadow makes the opposite of prophet." Something lovely there in that refusal to name the word lost, the opposite of prophet. He goes on, "I avert my gaze and cough, self-employed fluffer copying a feel of atmosphere funereal." These raucous tones shift down a gear. This puke, the lecherous voyeur, suggests Philip Larkin's own narrator in Churchgoing, when he snorts too loudly and donates an Irish sixpence before turning to a kind of winded contemplation. Crothers' narrator does quite brilliantly the same, invoking Thomas Wyatt to aid in his sexual reverie. He writes, "I know what is in hind to render unto Caesar. I know what is a star, a rail down on your knees, that far out seizes you in matters of the day, but bodies rise and people get carried away." It's a knockout poem that in the last line feels earned, like the emotions have settled and turned from disgust to rage, a lecherous reverie to a kind of wondering fear. The last line does, like the title, multiple work. But bodies rise and people get carried away. Something of the sexual act and the death act are combined in that line, both Thanatos and Eros, the two great drives. Bodies rise and people get carried away. People get excited, aroused, they become vivid, they live and thrive and reproduce, and they become dead. They disappear into death. The whole poem has been trying to avoid the fact of the funeral, and the reader suddenly realises the jokes, the leering, the sexual daydreaming are attempts to evade death. But all these things are true at the same time, and death and sex come anyway. Bodies rise and people get carried away. I'm babbling. This is a terrific collection. It's not several deer, but an entire herd of elegant, skittery animals that watch you very closely. Congratulations on it.
Wow. Thank you, Nick, for that introduction. I feel like I could just go home now. But yeah, there's the reading to do, and then there's a lecture before that. Can people hear me at the back on this side? And can people hear me at the back over here? That is unfortunate. Oh, there is water here as well. This is marvellous. It's like porn, isn't it? Said the poet Vidian Ravintherin to me. And here is love like a tinsmith's scoop, sunk past its gleam in the meal bin. That's what Vidian was talking about. The final stanza of Sunlight, the first part of Mossbone, the first poem in Seamus Heaney's 1975 collection, North. I am deeply honoured and still somewhat stunned to have been awarded the Seamus Heaney Centre Prize for my book, and I'm delighted to be giving this lecture in these surroundings to these witty and attractive people. Half a lifetime since I was last in New York. While the limousines wait in the street. In modern times, the word pornography connotes mediocrity, commercialism, and certain strict rules of narration, writes Vladimir Nabokov in his essay on a book entitled Lolita. The brief for this lecture was that I speak on the subject of my poetry. I find the poetry I write incomprehensible, but at least I understand it, writes Frederick Seidel. He never described himself as a poet or his work as poetry, writes Leonard Cohen in The Favourite Game. The fact that the lines do not come to the edge of the page is no guarantee. Poetry is a verdict, not an occupation. He hated to argue about the techniques of verse. The poem is a dirty, bloody, burning thing that has to be grabbed first with bare hands. I look down at my lecture notes, writes Maggie Nelson. Heartbreak is a spondy. Then I lay my head down on the desk and start to weep. Why doesn't this help? To argue about the techniques of verse. The extent to which a poem being like porn need not be entirely negative, an unapproachably impressive route to satisfaction, acoustically, semantically, surely a positive. And that was called love for the workers in sum. That sort of satisfaction being not the only kind available from a poem. Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart, ruling on the pornographic nature of Louis Malle's film Les Amants, said this: I shall not today attempt further to define the kinds of material I understand to be embraced within that shorthand description, and perhaps I could never succeed in intelligibly doing so, but I know it when I see it, and the motion picture involved in this case is not that. Poetry is a verdict. The pictures were so many, they started to move. Let me watch for the rest of my natural life, you said, and sank down in the field and breathed hard. Let me watch and watch without her knowing. Let me see her where she can't see me. As long as she can't see me, I can breathe hard here forever. From Patricia Lockwood's poem, Revealing Nature Photographs. The final stanza of Heaney's personal helicon. Now to pry into roots, to finger slime, to stare big-eyed Narcissus into some spring is beneath all adult dignity. I rhyme to see myself, to set the darkness echoing. Not an occupation. I rhyme to see myself as long as she can't see me. Nabokov. In pornographic novels, action has to be limited to the copulation of cliches. Style, structure, imagery should never distract the reader from his tepid lust. What has my inability to read novels, wonders the novelist David Markson, had to do with the way I have myself been writing over that same period, these books in which I leave out so much of the traditional stuff of fiction, plot, background, incident, description, whatever. You just turned your back on the crowd. The copulation of cliches. They will be all fingers and thumbs as they offer you a light or try to catch the bartender's eye for 2 fresh whiskey sours. The cliches of anticipated copulation in Paul Muldoon's poem Bluets from the 1983 collection Quoof. Heaney says of Robert Lowell that he went head on at the times. There was no more literary poet around, but at the same time he was like a great cement mixer. He just shoveled the world in and it delivered. Now that's what I yearn for, the cement mixer rather than the chopstick. Muldoon says that Quoof was written to purge myself of the very public language it employs, the kennings of the hourly news bulletin, a dirty, bloody, burning thing. They will seem shy as they help you with your wrap, though their palms are spread across your breasts. they hail a cab. In the first taxi he was alone, tra-la, Louis MacNeice. It is possible to offend people still, says Seidel, and my poems not infrequently do. One way to do it is to write beautifully what people don't want to hear. And later, in the wee small hours, you will lie on the bed of your own entrails, to be fist-fucked all night by bluets or by chanterelles until the morning that never comes. Nabokov. The pornographic novel must consist of an alternation of sexual scenes. The passages in between must be reduced to sutures of sense, logical bridges of the simplest design, brief expositions and explanations, which the reader will probably skip, but must know they exist in order not to feel cheated. Running for the money and flesh. That's often just craft anyway, says Marxin, a question of aesthetic balance, of getting the parts to interrelate, what I label at least once in each book as interconnective syntax, or call it poetic structure, despite the fictional length. Maggie Nelson's book Bluets, its brief numbered sections concerned with blue. Leonard Cohen again in an interview. It's a kind of tyranny of a posture, a kind of tyranny that exists today of what the right thing should be. And it's difficult for the writer to determine what he really thinks about things, what he really feels about things. So in my own case, I have to write the verse and then see if it's a slogan or not, and then toss it. But I can't toss it until I've worked on it and seen what it really is. So I employ the process of writing the verse and discarding it until I get down to something that doesn't sound like a slogan, that doesn't sound like something that's easy, that surprises me. Eventually I confess to my friend some details about my weeping, its intensity, its frequency. This is Maggie Nelson. She says, kindly, that she thinks we sometimes weep in front of a mirror not to inflame self-pity, but because we want to feel witnessed in our despair. Can a reflection be a witness? Can one pass oneself the sponge wet with vinegar from a reed? The mushroom name chanterelle means little cup. Humbert Humbert in Lolita, my little cup brims with tiddles. To set the darkness echoing until the morning that never comes. All that I know is a door into the dark, the first line of Heaney's poem The Forge, from the collection Door into the Dark. Deep in the grounds of a burnt-out hotel, among the bathtubs and the wash basins, 1,000 mushrooms crowd to a keyhole, goes Derek Mann's disused shed in County Wexford. Googling bluet reveals that as well as a fungus, it's now the name of a sex toy. Is opening a door into the dark an act of moving into the dark from the light, or an act of allowing the light to move into the dark? I know it when I see it. They are begging us, you see, in their wordless way, to do something, to speak on their behalf, or at least not to close the door again. Lost people of Treblinka and Pompeii, save us, they seem to say. Let the God not abandon us who have come so far in darkness and in pain. We too had our lives to live. You with your light meter and relaxed itinerary, let not our naive labours have been in vain. I think that the poet is a sensitive instrument designed to record anything which interests his mind or affects his emotions, says Louis MacNeice. If a gasometer, for instance, affects his emotions, or if a Marxian dialectic, let us say, interests his mind, then let them come into his poetry. He will be fulfilling his function as a poet if he records these things with integrity and with as much music as he can compass, or as is appropriate to the subject. A great sense of historical cycles, of injustice and catastrophe, looms at the back of the poem's mind, says Heaney of Man's A Disused Shell. But what gives the poem its sorrow and insight is the long perspective, and intimacy with the clay-floored fetor of the shed kept in mind and in focus from a point of detached compassion, in another world of freedom, light and efficiency. To reduce the mushrooms' lives and appetites to counters for the frustrations and desolations of lives in Northern Ireland is, of course, one of those political readings which is perfectly applicable, but we recognise that this allegorical approach ties the poem too neatly into its place. The amplitude of its effects, its vault-filling resonance, depend upon its displaced perspective. A kind of tyranny of a posture, detached compassion, as long as she can't see me. The danger of the poem that performs correctly for the reader without challenging or implicating them. So winter closed its fist and got it stuck in the pump. The plunger froze up in a lump in its throat, ice founding itself upon iron, the handle paralysed at an angle. Then the twisting of wheat straw into ropes, lapping them tight round stem and snout. Then a light that sent the pump up in flame. It cooled, we lifted her latch, her entrance was wet, and she came. Heaney's rite of spring, from door into the dark. Clenching your fist for the ones like us, Ireland, Hibernia, all night. For blue has no mind, writes Nelson. It is not wise, nor does it promote any wisdom. It is beautiful, and despite what the poets and philosophers and theologians have said, I think beauty neither obscures truth nor reveals it. All that I know is a door into the dark. I think beauty neither obscures truth nor reveals it. Likewise, it leads neither towards justice nor away from it. But then, once in a lifetime, the longed-for tidal wave of justice can rise up, and hope and history rhyme. Heaney in The Cure at Troy. Likewise, it leads neither towards justice nor away from it. It is pharmacon. It radiates. The extent to which it's meant to be problematic that hope and history don't rhyme. It's all about rhythm and rhyme as drugs, says Anthony Madrid. That's their justification. That's their glory. It is pharmacon. The crucial thing about English as a language for poetry, writes William Empson, is that you cannot rhyme the subject with the verb, because either the cat distracts and the nerves swerve, or the cats distract and the nerve swerves. This bit of grammar has been enormously helpful to English poetry by forcing it away from platitude. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant, writes Emily Dickinson. The extent to which it's meant to be problematic that nerve and swerves, or nerves and swerve, pretty much do rhyme. A crude bit of work Heaney called Rite of Spring. Something that doesn't sound like a slogan, that doesn't sound like something that's easy, that surprises me. Rite of Spring as one of two Heaney poems from Door into the Dark to appear in the Faber Book of Blue Verse. Does the world look bluer from blue eyes? Probably not, but I choose to think so. Self-aggrandizement. I know it when I see it. An irony, writes Empson in some versions of Pastoral, has no point unless it is true in some degree in both senses. For it is imagined as part of an argument. What is said is made absurd, but it is what an opponent might say. Opposition is true friendship, writes Blake. To beat real iron out, to work the bellows, the final line of Heaney's The Forge. But the rhymes say the subject isn't the subject. Don't be fooled, says Seidel, beneath all adult dignity. Kenneth Burke, a criticism of a poem is not the poem. In Normal Poetic Discourse, claims Veronica Forrest Thompson in her book Poetic Artifice, poets try to conceal the fact that a rhyme is more important than philosophy. Seidel, I like poems that are daggers that sing. Silence in grass and solace in blank verdure summon the frightful glare of nouns and nerves. The gentle foe, linguistically wounded, squeals like a car's brakes, like our twisted words, is how Forrest Thompson's poem Pastoral ends. The nerve swerves, linguistically wounded, daggers that sing. In Pastoral, Forrest Thompson explains, I realise in practice what I have long known in theory, that it is precisely those non-meaningful aspects of language, rhyme, rhythm and stanzaic metre are only the most obvious, which are poetry's strength and its defence. To work with bellows, to be grabbed first with bare hands. What had been tendentious obscurity of meaning becomes therefore a tendentious refusal of meaning. Apparently I not only managed to convey a sense of character in each case, says David Markson, but even some dramatic impact at the end as well. And this again in spite of there being only that meagre 1.5% that deals with them directly. Forrest Thompson describes Sonnet, the final poem in her final collection On the Periphery, as the love poem I have tried throughout to write straight and have been held back from by these technical and sociological difficulties. Heaney's poem Victorian Guitar, From Door into the Dark and from the Faber Book of Blue Verse, concerns a guitar inscribed thus, belonged to Louisa Catherine Coe before her marriage to John Charles Smith, March 1852. It speaks to and for the intimacy and communication that come from unseemly artistic endeavours. My love, if I write a song for you, to that extent you are gone. For as everyone says, and I know it's true, we are all always alone, writes Forrest Thompson in the Sonnet. I believe he cannot have known your touch like this instrument, for clearly John Charles did not hold with fingering, writes Heaney in Victorian Guitar. Never so separate, trying to be two, and the busy old fool is right. To try and finger myself from you distinguishes day from night. All fingers and thumbs. If I say I love you, we can't but laugh, since irony knows what we'll say. If I try to free myself from my craft, you vary as night from day. To argue about the techniques of verse, technical and sociological difficulties, tell all the truth, unless it is true in some degree in both senses. So accept the wish for the deed, my dear. Words were made to prevent us near. I rhyme to see myself, slant, scoop, fist, with bare hands, to prevent us near. The techniques of verse, it's like porn. Poetry is a verdict. I know it when I see it. Thank you so much. That was a bit of an experiment. I hope you don't feel like guinea pigs. It really is such a joy and an honour to be here. I really can't quite believe it. Tom and I, incidentally, have already made plans to steal all your wallets. Telling you is part of the plan. Some complicated reverse psychology. So yeah, I will. I'll do some poems from the book. We'll start with one that's not from the book. This is one that I wrote November of last year after a political occurrence around these parts. I don't know if the news reached you. It's called Ordering a Mudslide. Be not afraid. Or do be, do. The rallying cry is your call, perhaps your last. Poised at the bar, a variety of wall. Little eye spies mud sliding out of the shaker. The Cold War drum where the Irish cream their clean green jeans as in a dream. A dream of Mexico and Russia in mixed moods, double teaming and already melting a lack of meaning. An iceberg, besotted, scheming to be sated, shapeless. I was kind of thinking maybe it could rape less. Celebratory drink clinking has wounded the side of the glass that is my saviour. It's blasphemy, but the cloaca of the aperture leaking brown is looking lonesome, so, knowing you should be the bit of strange you want to see in the world, I stick my finger into that for a change, at which the tumbler divides on every issue. I need a tissue. My order won't take orders. A muddy crystal hysteria, enshrining disaster, redefining borders. So that was that. I will, good luck to you all. So I'm going to do 7 poems from the book. They are quite short. So the book has a little sequence of poems running through it, which are partly about female American guitarists. They're about other things as well, but I thought that much of the time I spend not thinking about poetry is spent thinking about female American guitarists. It might be quite efficient to combine those. So this one is this also the sort of title poem of the book, and that includes the words "several deer," and it's called "Blues for Khaki King." If I could get these 6 strings working, they still wouldn't work on you. I'm entitled to exit at any point, and everybody's glad when I do. I have never listened to Wild Thing and felt sorry for myself. Thin cuts of Wild Thing fall off the freezer shelf. Now we're going to do a cheer, starting way back at the back of the room and moving to the front in an approximation of Barack Obama's attack on all that his great nation holds dear. I hit the road, Jack. I hit several deer. I listen to the hits. A bit later I remember to steer. A piece of cake, a pissy pieced. Listen to my scales, Khaki, Louis McNeese's little fishes, circling the first hurdle, the second rate. The happy finish, each left fin wings its way to the inevitable right, the inalienable right bestowed upon those who ask more than once for applause, entitling everybody to exit through the big black backstage doors. It does also have some poems about animals in it. Most of you probably won't need to have it explained to you what an aye is, but in case you don't know, an aye is a particular kind of lemur, which is endangered partly because of superstitions among the humans of Madagascar pertaining to its not being conventionally attractive. This is called aye. pupil of the moon. When I look into my teacher's one dead eye, I meet my image, the ghost of which I am the ghost. Were I to reach out as if towards myself, holding my held gaze all the while, I would see me reaching in return, fingers branching across space, linking as a hyphen, a rigged bridge, a tripwire tripping orbits, gravities, tidal pull. When facing in vain my face, I am fulfilled by all that I fulfill, unworded impossible prophecies, deep in deep time. I must be self-satisfied, but am without delusions. I know that I am godless and the devil's censer-bearer, uncensored naked evil, darkness wearer. In moments of heat, I recall my other lives, burned at stakes for all that is at stake in me. I act dumb. My song would be a slow fall. I am a pupil of the moon. I repeat myself. I have learned to show one guise, to turn away from view my rhyming side. The effort to recite the poems rather than read them is not designed to make any of you feel uncomfortable. It's pretty much designed to make me feel uncomfortable, and it's very much working. And I've tried to learn a couple that I didn't previously have by heart for this event, so we will see how this next one goes. This is called Three Cuckoos, and I guess once upon a time it was meant to be a bit of a conversation with Heaney's collection North. It has been edited a lot over the years, so I'm not really sure what it's about anymore. So possibly if we have a Q&A, I can ask you what the poem is about and you can tell me. It's called Three Cuckoos. It's in 3 numbered sections. I've never had the confidence to announce 1, 2, 3 before sections of poems. I've seen other people do it, so I will just leave a meaningful pause. No other pause that I leave is at all meaningful. So, 3 Cuckoos. Pity the cuckoo. If not the adult, compelled by a node that levels the tilt of other lives, then the plump young ringer that leaves a nest. For as long as one might remember, it has been unwitting child to unwitting parents. Now it numbers the days until it grants that state the status of the done thing. Cuckoo has come to complain about misrepresentation. Sound drums in wood, tumbles through the woods, comes to a head, dies, flies up, fall-born. This is cuckoo spring, this the full brain pressing to the rim of the cup of the skull. Sockets brim with wonder at the heaped evictees, outgrown, cold out. Bailings out on scales unhoped, besiege the base of every tree. The cuckoo is a pretty bad son of a bitch. It watches you make your bed, then lies in it. It sows its wild oats in your rose garden, and with one swoop of its wing swaps a measure of molten mass into your good china. Drinking's ill-advised, but thirst being thirst, you might yet take on the chin a chill clump homing to roost in your mouth, volatile, vast. Another thing that's tricky to do at readings is acknowledging when a poem has an epigraph. And where do you put that? This next poem has an epigraph from Wallace Stevens. It's just the words, "A planet's encouragement." And the poem is called Junk. The world as medication. It's becoming an addiction. Where there's leisure for the coral reef, there's no need for fiction. But it's not about need. My nurse provides suction. She wields limpets lightly, her lucid affection. She ought to be sectioned, one section, two. Meiosis for me, nothing for you. There's nothing to do. I do it for cash, man. Women take action, so sue me, sue. The glue of the gloom that makes my motions slow. My nurse was once nurse-scented Jetson. She'd float, she'd block out the light. Now she butters my bones. I do think it best that the devil rays no. The jellyfish spread on the sunken dream. Policing the polyps makes somebody mean. Nothing is lost that can't be re-killed. The world as medication, prescriptions as landfill. So this next poem is called Muse. I don't know if you might have inferred this already, but I'm not hugely into the concept of the muse. So this poem is about disliking that idea. It was also sort of about an ex of whom I am similarly not all that fond. There's a bit where it might sound like I'm censoring myself, and deliberately not saying a rude word. It is actually just a blank on the page, which seemed very funny and clever to a young man of 30. At 33, I have, of course, put away such childishness. Muse. That's an ankle bracelet, yes, but you don't have an ankle. Or so it appeared, paddling as you were in the inkwell. A fetter of correcting fluid I spied and misidentified. I'd let you walk all over me, you'd leave huge indents. But for this need to live out the meaning of my creed, by sleeping in my feed. You must have worked hard not to have heard of Billie Holiday before your mid-30s. I border unimpressed. A strange fruit hangs just south of my knees, which is very low, daringly so. Hence out I go, out on my limbs, two of them, initially. What in an interim winces and limps, ponders the Sphinx. An errant ibis climaxes in its nostril. The punchline's cudgels an iron bar. Who would dare cross it? Alone in my bed and well fed, I get to the other side. On days ladies die, I set alight a black flag. This is for cowardice. So I'll do two more, which are the last two poems in the book. One of them is another one of the female American guitarist ones. It's called Blues for Katie Crutchfield. Katie Crutchfield plays in a fantastic band called Waxahachie, who take their name from Waxahachie Creek in Alabama. And this is relevant to the poem. There is a fish that lives in Waxahachie Creek, which is called the sac à lait, or the bag of milk. But it's also called the Crappie, C-R-A-P-P-I-E. And I read this poem in Belfast about 18 months ago, and you don't expect this to happen in Belfast, but somebody came up to me afterwards and said, I'm from Alabama. And we pronounce it croppy, actually. Which one could have done something with if one wanted, but I have heard it said both ways, and so of course I'm going for the one that sounds a little bit weird. Another thing to mention about this poem is that it includes the word autotomy, which means self-splitting, and it refers to the practice of losing a limb to escape a predator. Blues for Katie Crutchfield. I believe I'll bust my doom today. The belief will be suspended. The mantis prays for the sac à lait. The end of the world has ended, and Confessio Amantis plays line 14, beyond which nothing, on repeat, to celebrate. It comes through walls like spam, it dulleth ofter a manner's wit, it whittles one down. The crappy rejects the prayer, but on it goes, it flays, it blows, exit pursued by a bore. Give up on the stick figure, throw me, I'll fetch me, my portrait's a selfie, side on I see you, my profile is sketchy. I don't have Waxahachie Creek, I don't know the bite of an elk, I barely know how to speak, I creak, my synovial fluid is malted milk. This you should know. If you're tiring of trying, you're free to let go. My doings undone from the get-go, my sleepy head, my coma toes. My trail goes cold. My army of geckos lose limbs by the thousand. I'm talking autotomy. It's something you taught to me. Take my hand. A lot of the book is written in these kind of long-lined rhyming couplets. And the last poem written for the book was the final poem in the book, and it's called Couplets. And it was an attempt just to get that form out of my system, which, if you're interested, didn't work. So if you like that form, then ideally there'll be a second book in a couple of years, and it'll just be that again and again. Thank you so much to absolutely everybody involved in this event. It is, again, such an honour, and thank you all for coming on this day when it has in fact not been snowing. This is called Couplets. Oh, little poems, loitering always around my blind spot, with pips in your grin gaps and your flaps unzipped. I shall, I swear, compare thee to the wind, that which winnows the unlovely from my beloved, this comparison for the win. Fork my life in a yellow wood, in your long and narrow way. I'd better claim that the name of my game is Go Not Far Today. Stricken and flayed, miming a picket line, air fencing, reducing my antlered spirit guide to a pencil sketch of venison. All skin and clone at this point, I buff my binding to shunt my original sense out of sight. I worsen that tooth, I rip this joint. Another dead white dude lost in a forest. The urbane jangle of the 20 memento mori he purloined. His poor loins, unguarded, gone off grid, sat so long in lechery's lap he ceased to want it. Ironical clap, 3 cheers. Clear as the kestrel that seemingly floats in his wrecked left eye is the outlook. Death is not the end. Every bird's an insect. Every champion doesn't mind being thick. A trickle of light petting obscures the sickle's glare. Red is every squirrel. As for Splatterbrain's caterwaul, variation on a theme tune, why aren't they screaming? Why can't I be more like them? How might glow that so swells the grove be led to settle? Can't write, slightly bold, can write a little. I write of hell, I sing and ever shall, of heaven, and hope to have it after all. Robert Herrick said that, teasingly. Can't he hear me knocking heaven's storage capacity? I do. It ain't easy. It's Adam and Adam, not Adam and Eve. You're a big girl's blouse all the way. Let us bray. a reading from the Book of Heckles. The first line index opens with lengthening howls that take up columns. I is not my favourite vowel. My favourite language is volumes. I speak it. My picture is worse than 1,000 bad words. It's a lecture. I give it to the trees that won't let me hug them. A buzz as of 1 billion souls is all my audience is, or was. Little poems strike my pose. Observe me thus aloft, a trophy, dribbling and dripping a rank primordial soup, the unquiet gravy. Before the flies arrive, you might wrestle me off this meat hook. Don't bother, they're here. Oh, little poems, oh, little book. Go, little book, be gone. Be with me on my wedding night. Our mutual revulsion binds our passions in it not. That's what I got for you, Jason.
Can I prevail upon Adam for a few questions? Any questions for Adam? Can you? Yeah, just a moment.
Tell the story about the lady at the airport there.
Oh yes, the lady at the airport.
Question.
Yeah. So I haven't flown to the US for a long time, and I was quite nervous about all the immigration business, just because anytime I feel I'm being accused of something, I start looking like I've done it. And it was actually, I had the loveliest man ever on this side of the flight, but when I was checking my bag in at Heathrow, I was getting all sorts of questions about what I did for a living, how long I'd been doing it, where I was, and so on. And I was asked what the purpose of coming to New York was, and I said, well, I'm giving a lecture at NYU tomorrow night. And she said, oh, how many people are going to be there? I said, well, I hope a lot, but it's a poetry lecture, so I don't know. So it's delightful to see more than 4 people. If rather than asking a question, anyone wants to tell me what my lecture was about, I would appreciate that.
I happen to know that Adam will answer any question you pose to him with a glass of wine in his hand at the reception downstairs. But first, I want to thank Nick Laird for a brilliant introduction. I want to thank the Quinlan family for endowing this lecture and for bringing their family into Glucksman Ireland House and giving it the feel of a home for an evening again. And I want to thank Adam Crothers for a bravura reading. Thank you, Adam. Please join us downstairs. Thanks.